What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to the Creative Channel podcast. This is entry number 37, and today's guest is by far one of my favorites and one I'm most excited to share. And her name is Lacey Picazo. Lacey and I got in touch through a introduction via our mutual friend, Andy DeVito. So a huge thank you to Andy, or else I'm sure I would have been lost in, I'm sure, Lacey's very crowded inbox. But Lacey was so kind enough to make the time for me to answer some questions and just to really get a better sense of what she does. And her organization is Zoco Design in Columbus, Ohio. And this team is full of absolute, superstars. And if you need validation of that, just go to their website because it is an incredible UX and UI masterpiece and experience. A little bit more about Zoco. They are a human-centric design-focused branding and design studio in Columbus, Ohio. A big focus and emphasis on connecting people and product. And there's a huge emphasis on just team and really getting into the work and creating something awesome that speaks to humans and creates flawless UX and UI experiences for some pretty big organizations, as I will read here in a minute. But if you guys want to learn more about Lacey or Zoco, Lacey actually published an awesome LinkedIn newsletter about a year ago at this time of uploading, and it was for the 10-year anniversary of Zoco. And I really encourage you guys to read that because not only speaks to the importance of UX UI and tells a little about the founding story of Zoco, but it's just a very well-written piece that, tells everything that goes behind starting a business. And all the emotions involved, and it got me so fired up to not just talk to Lacey, but to also just to do my own thing and to see what all goes into building a successful and hugely impactful enterprise that Lacey has managed to create. But a little bit more about Lacey Picazo. She is a 2020 Future 50 in Columbus. She's worked with companies at Zoco like Huntington, Abercrombie & Fitch, and TaskRabbit, just to name a few. No big deal. She has been a sponsor or board member in organizations such as the CSCA, Rev1 Ventures Expert Network, the Young Entrepreneurs Academy, and the Mid-Ohio Food Bank, among others. In this episode, expect to learn Lacey's career story, her guiding principles, and her inspiration, what her ideal day looks like, empowering herself to say no and getting comfortable with making demands, along with building career capital, being naturally curious, and much, much more. Thank you again to Lacey so much for coming on the show. I'm super excited to share this interview with you guys. If you guys are enjoying the show, please leave a like, comment, rating, review on whichever platform you're listening to. That does so much to help the show, and there's a ton of value in this episode. So you can compensate us a little bit just by hitting that like button or leaving a review or just sharing with a friend. That would make me super happy. But without further ado, please welcome to the Creative Journal podcast, Mrs. Lacey Picazo. High performers and people that, would be a good role model for younger people in the creative industry to look up to. And you're the first name that came to mind. Do you have any idea why he would say that?
That's super kind of him. Andy was one of my very first bosses as a designer. I worked for him as an intern at Ohio State Athletics many moons ago. And so he was just like a very kind leader who really cared a lot about his team, helped go to bat for his team within the larger org, and would really be the champion for what design could be, because it's easy in certain organizations for design to just be seen as executional, like to get a job done. And he believed that the role of design was bigger than that. And so he was an inspiring leader to work with early in my career while I was still in college at Ohio State.
Nice. Something that we talk about a lot is how do you seek out role models, and what is your process for kind of learning off of them? Do you was there, especially with Andy, was there a conscious thing, this is the person I want to be like? Asking a lot of questions maybe is probably something that you did a lot. But is there anything else that you would advise to kind of just soak up as much as you could when you're in a situation where you want to get the most out of it?
I think designers, Andy, are well situated to ask lots of questions, to be naturally curious. If you're not naturally curious, you might be in the wrong field. But I think spending a lot of time, to your point, asking everything that comes to mind, and like really putting your own ego to rest to say there are no bad questions, there are no dumb questions. Ask everything and ask for what you want. Be willing to say it. And I think there's a lot of fear early in career, to not ask for an opportunity, not ask for somebody's time, to think, who am I to do that? And the more you do it, the more you realize people are actually very kind and willing to share their thoughts with you and willing to spend time with you. And you have to be a little bit opportunistic about it, right? So, as much as I've been planful in my career, there are just some times where you come across somebody, meet somebody that you're really geeked out to learn from, and that opportunity is not ongoing, right? It's like in the moment, you have to make the ask, you have to make the request. Um, and so being willing in that moment to like quiet any internal introvert to just say, you know what, I'm going to ask this person for their time. And most of my mentors in my career, Andy, have been that. I ask folks for coffee every single week, folks I've never met, folks I've met many times but want to continue to learn from, and just have vulnerable, open conversations about what's keeping us both up at night, what we're excited about, where we see the world and our industry going, and be in a continuous learning phase.
Yeah, I love that. And I think obviously this is the first time we've met, but that's one of the things that I've learned from you. And it applies to kind of every level you're at. So, like for you, I know one of your examples was at a speaking event, you kind of set the boundary that you don't do evening speaking events, which is one of the reasons why I'm so excited just to have a little bit of your time. But like setting that boundary and just saying, having the confidence in yourself to make demands, big or small. Like in my situation, that might look like just having the chance to speak up at a meeting, or, even asking someone like you to be on the show, or um, kind of leveling up in that sense where you get a sense, your confidence improves over time. That's something I want to ask you about too. Like, how have you noticed, and I know it's kind of hard to see, from a driver's seat, like most things are, but how have you kind of seen your evolution of, you from the outside, you look like a very confident person. You've built and scaled a team, and I know you giggle, but like um, from the outside, you look like someone who has it all together, which I know isn't true for everyone. So this is something I've learned too. But how have you kind of seen your personal confidence over time, and how do you change over time, and how do you kind of keep tabs on making sure you're still doing uncomfortable things as you grow?
Yeah. So I do this naturally as a person, but something we can also learn from our craft. So I run a team of UXers and product designers, Andy, and a big aspect of what we do to make our work effective is a concept called a retro, where you're reflecting back on how something went to think, okay, what can I continue to do in the future that went well? What should I start trying or experimenting on? And what should I maybe stop doing that didn't serve me? So I'm a very reflective person, both because I'm immersed in it and my team and everything that they do and are brilliant at. And just naturally, I'm constantly trying to improve and think through how can I reflect and get better. I bring that up because it actually is really helpful for building comfort in uncomfortable situations. Um, I've come to the point now where I can say, with just the reflection of the last 10 years of building Zoco, what was the worst that ever happened, right? Like, what's the worst that could happen if I walked up to this stranger at a networking event? What's the worst that can happen if I slid into somebody's DMs and asked for time? And typically, like when you actually write out or say out loud what's the worst that can happen, you realize it's crazy. Like the stories you're telling yourself inside of your head,
Mhm.
they're not going to happen. Somebody's
Yeah.
not going to turn to you and be like, "Oh, Lacey, why are you saying hi to me? Ew, go away." Like it's not going to happen. Um, and by having the past to look at and say like, yeah, nothing that bad has ever happened. I'm a secret introvert. I like deep conversations with new people. I don't love shallow networking with lots and lots of people, but I've built a lot of comfort in it just because I've learned nothing terrible comes of it. Actually, really great things come of it because I get to meet really interesting people that have unique points of view on the world that I can spend time with outside of that event in the future. And so I see it as a vehicle for getting to know some of those people. And that brain shift turns it from something scary and terrible and I don't like this to, okay, like I know I'm going to be drained by going to this event because it's just never going to be what fills my cup. But
Mhm.
I know it's good for me. I know that nothing, negative, there aren't going to be any repercussions for me. And so I should just do it. And I think the more at bats you have, the more comfort you build in things that are uncomfortable. You just have to get over the hump those first times to say, you know what? I'm just going to do it. I'm going to commit to it. I'm going to do this for myself because I think I need to, or I know it's good for me. And we'll just see what happens. And the other thing I'll tell you, Andy, is anytime in my career that I've thought in the moment that something was truly terrible, like something happened in my business, my personal life, whatever, where I'm like, okay, why is this happening to me? Like, this is not what I expected or what I wanted. I think of this theory that I did not come up with, but you think about, well, how will I feel in 10 seconds, in 10 weeks, in 10 months? And what I've
Mhm.
learned is like everything bad that happens tends to feel really terrible right close to the event. But like if you can look out forward into the future, I know that like looking back at my career, by 10 weeks in, it doesn't mean I don't still feel it, but like I'm moving past it. I've got a plan, like everything is going well. And by 10 months in, I'm not even thinking about it, right? Like
Mhm.
I'm on to something else. There's some new problem of the day. And typically that terrible thing that happened almost had to happen in order to make the space or teach me something, um, make room for another opportunity. And so oftentimes, like, it's given me a better perspective now to think, if something rattles me a bit, well, is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing? I don't know. I'm not going to label it because there's not enough evidence now to say, is this truly good for me or bad for me?
Yeah, that's awesome. I have a lot of that same internal dialogue, and I think a lot of people do. And I know just since starting like a career in general, and like I just graduated college, I just got my first apartment, and I'm seeing that things are almost never as overwhelming. Things are almost never as bad as they appear to be in your head. So kind of having that self-talk filter and running yourself through these things is something that I think helps a lot of people, and it's really encouraging to hear that someone like yourself goes through those things too. But what I love is kind of you touched on was your concept of like where do you get your energy from, and
Mhm.
kind of having that post mortem of assessing of whether you're an introvert and what you truly enjoy, and kind of curating your career in a way that optimizes for those things. Um, and but also at the same time making the sacrifices in the moment to realize that okay, maybe this networking event, maybe this thing is uncomfortable, but it's what I need. It's what I need to do right now. So that discipline part of it is true. But something I wanted to ask you about is out of all the kind of the creatives and the entrepreneurs and stuff that I've studied and tried to learn from, you seem like someone more than anyone that kind of had this idea. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but kind of had the idea of like beginning with the end in mind.
Hmm.
Um, like there seem to be like certain inflections kind of like in your journey in your career where you made a sacrifice that was meant to be kind of for the greater good. I know you took a pharmaceutical sales job with the intention of trying to build career capital, which is something that Cal Newport talks about and something one of the books I read. Um, and it seems like, and it's so hard to detach from that because I know there's been parts in my job where it's like I'm doing something totally different from where I want to be doing, and all you're thinking about in the
Mhm.
moment is like, man, this is not what I want my life to look like. How I'm totally on the wrong track, but kind of being able to zoom out and see like how this connects to the bigger picture is kind of something that maybe you can only do kind of connecting the dots looking backwards, one of those kind of things. But yeah, I would love to hear your perspective on making certain decisions that are in service of where you want to end up ultimately.
For sure. Yeah, and I would say, Andy, it's been a mix of being really planful and intentional and being opportunistic when things arise, right, that are different than I expected and trying to be flexible to meet that opportunity where it lies. But you're right. I've definitely taken on things, tested things, experimented things that I believe will help me learn a skill that I believe will help put me in a better situation for the future. I do try to approach every day with the thought that life is long rather than life is short and trying to play that long game, right? And so one of the examples you brought up, prior to starting Zoco's founding story as a UX studio. So I was a designer by background, like yourself. Worked for Andy, worked for a couple of agencies and in-house some other spots, but really just didn't find my fit. Found that there are a couple of different pieces I wasn't excited about to be working in as a designer. I wanted a more inclusive team. I wanted to be able to understand all parts of the business. I didn't want to be seen as a pixel pusher or as solely a creative, right? I wanted to talk to the end users and be able to involve human-centered design principles for the things that I was building. And so I found that I was designing a lot of things I wasn't super enamored by, just because I didn't believe that I had enough context to build them. Fast forward, I had an opportunity, though, while I was a designer and I was freelancing at the time, to build a startup with my partner. And we were accepted in an accelerator program. So that was a bit of like opportunisticness. I hadn't intended to set forth into being a startup founder, to building a tech product. But it's like, okay, like this is super interesting to me and is very related to the things that I'm craving out of my career. Like, let's try it and let's see. And what that did for me, Andy, was to really introduce me to the Columbus technology and startup ecosystem, to realize how supportive it is and how inclusive it is and how easy it is to ask somebody, I don't really know what I'm doing, Andy. Like, do you know how to do this part? Like, what can you tell me? And that people were very helpful. And I'm getting over a cold, so I'm going to do this a few times.
You're totally fine.
But so it ended up leading to the opportunity where I am today, where I saw myself building my own business. And I started to build the confidence to say, I see things that I would like to be different, the way that I'm working as a designer, for myself and for my peers. And I'm not seeing that as an opportunity somebody else is building right now. So what if I built it? And so I was contemplating this idea. I wanted to build my own studio, was interested in building a creative business, but didn't want to be a freelancer, a consultant. I really take a lot of energy from having a team and a consistent team that we can all learn and grow together. And so I was thinking about this, and I had just gotten over the confidence of like, okay, most things I don't know about building a business, I can teach myself or I can learn from other people. And so I feel confident that those unknowns, like I can figure out. But I feel really uncomfortable with asking somebody to give me money for me to do work for them. Like at the time, like all the freelancing I was doing was very opportunistic, was very just somebody reached out to me and I said, okay, sure. Yeah. Like this is what I would charge. Let's do it. But actually going out and telling somebody who doesn't know who I am, like, hey, you have a problem I can solve. How about we work together? And so I was talking with a friend of mine who was in medical device sales about this. And about this fear and how does she get over it? She's so natural there. And she's like, no, like you just have to have a lot of at-bats to get used to it. Like it's not so bad. It's not so scary. And you should try it. Like there's nothing like just jumping in with both feet. Right. And so I said that was a good idea. And I looked into it a bit and ended up, long story short, getting a role as a pharmaceutical sales rep for another company and worked in that, freelance designing for about a year and a half. Was not the job for me, Andy, was not something I think I would have ever like truly loved, but it also helped me realize, oh, this isn't as scary as I thought it would be. And it isn't all these misconceptions you might have in your head of what it looks like to sell to somebody, right? Like there are lots of different ways to do everything in the world. And yes, there are maybe some people who do it the way I was afraid of, but that doesn't mean that's how I had to do it. And I could find my own success in a way that felt comfortable for me. And so that was kind of like a constant learning in my career that I reflect on, that like, hey, things don't have to be the way other people have done them before. Think about the goal first, and you can try all sorts of different ways to get to that goal. And so that built enough comfort to say, like the way that I do this works for me. It works for other people. And I feel like I've gotten from this what I need to get from it. And so I continued to pull back from that career until it was like, okay, I'm kind of shortcutting my job. I should probably just put in my notice. And then took a bit of time and decided, I'm going to start Zoco. I'm going to start my own studio.
Love that. Yeah. I love the concept of kind of finding a way to you approach this problem and you kind of find a way to make it work for you, by kind of taking it into your own hands and putting your own spin on it. I think that might be kind of part of your own creative process. I think that's, a big part of everyone's creative process is kind of putting their own personal spin on things. But
Mhm.
one of the things I know, because I know everyone, and also acknowledging to yourself, Lacey, that everyone is uncomfortable doing, whether it's sales, whatever word you want to call it, but doing it in a way isn't that is enjoyable to you and makes you really feel like you're portraying your value. And this can go whether you're talking to your employer, whether you're talking to prospects or clients. The idea of portraying value and doing it in a way where you're not short selling yourself, and you're also being truthful and realistic is a very valuable skill. So it's cool to see that you learned that. One of the things I tried because um, making a network, building connections is admittedly the biggest hurdle in not just my personal business, but a lot of people that are trying to get from 0 to 1, whether it's building their own career or trying to scale some sort of a business.
Mhm.
And I think that's what sets people apart. So it's one of those things that you have to take into your own hands. So one of my ways of doing that was to keep score. Was how I've like pretty much ingrained all of my habits that have stuck to this point, whether it's in like fitness or nutrition or building relationships, is to kind of like keep score. So I'll have like a list, and to me, success is getting uncomfortable and checking a name off of the list and say like that was a win. I reached out and I put my best foot forward. And then whatever if you don't feel the same energy back, if there's no reciprocation, then you're already successful because you took the step to go outside of your comfort zone. So that's kind of my application to that. But one thing as you can tell, I'm kind of trying to like zoom in and out with this interview. Something that Tim Ferriss does, but I probably don't do it as well. But so kind of zooming in a little bit, Lacey, we talked about your career and like what got you from A to B. What does your day to day look like now? So what is like, I know Ali Abdaal has this concept of like, he'll go into his Google Calendar and he'll build out this thing called an ideal week. And so what does that look like for you, I guess?
I do have an ideal week map, Andy. I will be honest though and say I don't always meet it, depending on the season, on the needs of my family, on the needs of Zoco, on the needs of our clients and team. There are definitely seasons I make trade-offs on my own boundaries in my calendar. Um, and I would love to say that I don't, but we're all human. And so my
Right.
ideal calendar, what I try to optimize for is having no meetings on Mondays. Monday is more a day for reflection, for deep work, for strategy, for prepping for the week ahead, for all of the big initiatives to work on the business, not in it, that I have been hoping to get to that just require more time, that are really hard to make any meaningful impact on if I'm just trying to tackle it in 20 to 30 minutes in between coffee conversations, right? Like there's just not
Mhm.
enough time for that. I look at Fridays somewhat similarly, but Fridays are my day that's just for the team. And so I end up having all my one-to-ones on Fridays. It's a good time to be reflective for their week and everything that's went well, or everything that they're curious about or that they're planning for the next week. Um, it's also like just easier to get those things scheduled then, because we found our clients typically want to have most meetings between Tuesdays to Thursdays. So I try to hold the space on Friday that this is a team day where Lacey's available to Zoco. And I can hopefully get some more deep work done too, and also wrap up all the things needed for the week. But that means Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday are pretty heavy with everything
Mhm.
else I want to cram into that week. All the folks I want to meet with, all the conversations that I want to have, um, all of the emails that come out of those, right? I might have a coffee with you, Andy, and you say, hey, I'm interested in meeting a person like this. And I'll say, oh, I can think of 3 people you should talk to. So then I'm writing intro emails after we just met for an hour. And
Mhm.
that ends up being a lot of what my week is. But Tuesday through Thursday are heaviest in people days, and days that I'm spending a lot of time with others. Oh, that's my daughter's cat.
Yeah.
Um,
Cats are
uh,
always welcome. Yeah.
that's
Mhm.
right.
Mhm.
And so I get energy from having one-on-one conversations with all sorts of people, tons of energy. It's when I end up having lots of big group conversations that, well, I do well in those and can find them exciting. I do feel drained. So it's more reason to kind of bookend my weeks to make sure that I have ample energy going into the weekend with my family.
Hmm. Yeah, that's really self-aware of you. I feel the same way as far as where we kind of touched on it was where you're getting your energy from, and I had always gone through kind of the conception of myself, and I think we all attach kind of labels to our own identity because it's hard to see from the inside from the driver's seat, but I always kind of attached myself to like I'm an introvert, um, and that just came from I was very social. I was isolated growing up. I had a hearing aid. I took speech therapy. So I was always, when you can't like really hear anyone, you're kind of like in your own bubble a lot. So you kind of do your own thing. And that was fine. Like I had a great childhood, but like, then I started going to like some of these events, like Chamber of Commerce, BNI, stuff like that. And you start talking about the things that you're doing on your own and how you're helping other people. And I got just so much energy from, the one-on-one side of that. And I was like, okay, maybe I'm not an introvert, but I I like to spend time alone, but I get my energy from having conversations with other people, and it takes a pretty big situational awareness to not just realize that, but also like optimize your schedule for that, and then
Yeah.
um, put the times where you get the most energy to fit into your schedule so you can get the most done. But yeah,
I think
I
to
love
that
your
point, Andy, it's like nothing is really black and white. Everything's on a spectrum. So I think
mhm,
for a long time, I wanted to identify as being an extrovert because I thought it was good for me, and because I don't know, some other people identify me that way because I can show up in conversations and be engaged and jump into groups with new people I've never met. But it's all on a spectrum, right? It's everything is kind of in a gray space, and so there are elements of introversion, elements where I can behave as an extrovert. But I think to your point, it's about energy. It's about being real with yourself with like, okay, if I want to continue to fight another day, like if I want to keep doing this, how do I fill my own cup, take care of myself? And what are the things that give me that? And what are the things that I can do because they're good for me, but they might deplete me a bit. So I have to be conscious of how much I take those on and when and how.
hmm, love that. Yeah. So kind of zooming back out, um, how have you? Like I said, you seem like a very someone who operates ahead of time, like ahead of schedule. Like you begin with the end in mind, sort of thing. How have you kind of curated your not? And this can apply to a lot of different things, but how have you curated your audience and your circle? And this can apply to whether it's hiring, whether it's relationships, choosing a partner, your friend group, the networking groups. Because I can even experience it like in my first job, like some of the people that I spend time with that I'm running close
Mm.
circles with because of whether it's just a job or you have to communicate with them. You're not as in control of your time or your circle. And I can see how the thoughts and the words of other people kind of work your way into your own mindset. So
Yeah.
how have you kind of gone about your career as by getting yourself, into circles with high performers, people that you admire and want to rub off on you, in kind of like all areas of life? Like how do you kind of keep tabs on that?
Mhm. Yeah, I have a few different answers to this, but I think this is a really good question and is really important for people to be mindful of because it makes a huge difference. Um, I mean, my answer is really about finding your tribe, Andy, and being able to find the people that fill your cup and that you share similar values and mindsets and goals and beliefs with. But it's really hard to find your tribe until you know how you position yourself. And so you had asked earlier, like, how do you make the most of conversations and how do you get in touch with people and how do you make the most of networking and know what things to go to? I've seen a lot of really smart, really talented people struggle there because they don't know how to position themselves. And as a designer, you understand what brand is and you understand what positioning is, but most people don't think about it, right? And so positioning is not just for brands and products, it's for people too, right? And so if I think about who am I as a person, where do I want to go and grow, and who are the sorts of people that I want to be like, that I want to be with. Like, you have to think about yourself in a tight positioning, which really just means what bucket would you put me in? How would you describe me? And how do you keep that tight and narrow? Because we're in 2024 now, I guess. I've talked to lots of folks over the last couple of years who are senior executives, who are C-suite, who are really talented, have this amazing career. And when I'm having coffee with them, I say, like, what's next? What sort of job are you looking for? And they say, well, I don't know, because I could do anything. My career has been this broad, and I could do some finance, I could do some operations, I could do some merchandising, I can do some creative direction, I could do, like all of these different things. It's like, oh gosh, you're going to really struggle in a job interview. Like, I have to tell you, like, I don't know who to connect you with. And I say, well, what type of company are you looking for? Tell me more about the specifics. Well, it could be big, it could be small, it could be anything. I just want a great team. Well, that's so ambiguous. And we as humans, whether we like it or not, because it also creates a lot of problems in the world, we want to bucket people in groups and categories, right? And that's what positioning is thinking through, like, okay, when I say McDonald's, like, I have a certain positioning in my head that I think of McDonald's for, and things I attribute with McDonald's that I may not a steakhouse brand or something else, right? And so you have to think about how you position yourself to be able to find your tribe. Like, how would you describe yourself? How do you want others to see you? And then where do you want to continue to be in the future? And I think you need to have a lot of self-reflection to be able to identify who is your tribe, right? And to be willing to do some experimenting with who your tribe is, because it's also going to change over time. But one thing that I've done there, Andy, is to surround myself with lots of other ambitious people who have high aspirations for themselves and for the impact they'll make in the world, but also really give a damn about their family and community. And so both of those things are very important to me. And it's easy, if you over-index on one side or the other, to like almost create your own guilt track, like your own negative head trash. Like, if I spend time with people who are 100% all in, only focused on family, and that is great for them, and that is wonderful, they're not doing anything wrong. But by spending a lot of time with them, when they start talking through, like, oh my gosh, I'm involved with XYZ in my kid's school, and I don't know how you have time for all this stuff. How do you spend time with your kids on homework, and how do you XYZ? And here's what I'm doing. I start to like really beat myself up internally, like, oh gosh, should I be doing that? Should I be going to all of my kids, like volunteering for all of their field trips and all of their school holiday parties? And gosh, maybe I should be doing that. I'm a terrible mom. And I'm not, by the way, but like, it's just really easy when you compare yourself, because that is what that person is all in on, and good for them. That is amazing. And I want to be all in for my kids too, but in a different way. The same thing goes if I spend time with people who don't have any focus on their family, don't have any focus on community, and don't have any focus on their health or their personal well-being. And they're just grinding nonstop to meet a vision, to meet a career goal. Listen, I can learn a lot from those people, and I have a lot of those people in my circle, but they're not the people I spend the most time with. They're not the people that I seek out for the biggest challenges that I'm facing, because I think their values and where they focus might be a little different than mine. So I've spent a lot of time curating my closest group of friends and mentors and peers, the people that I will shut down a restaurant with on a Tuesday night after our kids go to bed, right? Because it's the best time for us to meet. Spending time with those people fills my cup, aligned to my values, challenge me in the things that I want to do and where I'm going. But you have to do a lot of introspection first to be able to identify who are those people. And by the way, if they share your values, they're going to be super jazzed and energized to spend time with you too, right? And so it becomes very symbiotic, where you grow together, you have each other's back, just by being super aligned on values and positioning and the things that are important to you.
Yeah, I love that. So, kind of a quick one-off. What is your process of self-introspection look like? Is that journaling, or is it some kind of a meditation or anything? I know that's kind of a specific question, but
no, it's good. I am a bit of an experimenter and a dabbler, Andy. So I will say I don't stick with a lot of practices long term. I do lots of different things over time, and not for like a week or two. Like, I'll go all in on something, but it'll be a while. So I've had a meditation practice. I actually worked with a meditation coach for more than a year, who was amazing, by the way. And it's made me much more self-aware of my negative self-talk, of when that tiny voice creeps in, pretty loudly to say, hey, you're not doing this well. You could be doing this better. How dare you? Like all the negative thoughts you could have, to be aware of that so I could shut it down and say, you know what? I think I'm doing a good job. You can go quiet yourself. So meditation has helped. I have pretty tight diet and sleep regimens. I found those two things are really important to me into some of my personal conditions. And so I'm very thoughtful about how I fuel my body and how I rest my body. I have episodes and periods of doing certain types of workouts to keep my body active and healthy. But I would not say that I have been consistent throughout my whole life and what those looked like or what seasons they take on. But I think it's who you surround yourself by, right? Like if you surround yourself by people who are always woe is me, who are always really negative, like it's really hard to, especially if you're prone to negative self-talk, to not let some of that creep in. And so I try and spend a lot of time with optimistic, grounded people, or people who, maybe everything's always sunny, but they're not as rattled by things, right? Like they can share my perspective of, yeah, that happened and that's really hard. But is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? We don't know yet. Like let's just see. And I think spending more time with people that aren't as easily rattled has made me less flappable as a leader, which is something that I worked on a lot the first 5-7 years as Zoco.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, that kind of goes back to the topic of, curating the people you spend your time with, because what I think whether it's, your habits or your audience or the people you surround yourself with, what I'm seeing a lot from you is that you see how the inputs create the outputs, and you're conscious of, filtering through those and only giving yourself the best chance to be the best version of yourself. So yeah, I love that a lot. But kind of the one of the last things I wanted to touch on, because I know we're getting close on time, but if you had to, and I'm not going to ask the question like if you could talk to your younger self, what would you say? Because I've heard a lot of you have a lot of public facing interviews, and my goal going in was to ask some unique questions and kind of force you to think a little bit, and not just repeat some of the other stuff I've already heard you say. So if you could kind of like, I know there's kind of this thought exercise where if you could speed run your career, going back, what are the things that you would fix differently? So if you had to get to what you would like to where you were now, like say like 5 years sooner, what are the habits you have attributed to getting you to where you are now, and what would you optimize more if you had to kind of speed run it and do it again, I guess?
Yeah. Gosh. I would love to have a concise answer. My go-to answer, Andy, is that I don't know that I would, because I think all the biggest challenges and hurdles I faced that made things take longer, I think I needed to experience the pain of those in order to learn the things that I learned. But if that isn't how the world worked and I could have learned them just much more quickly, I would say I would probably go back and try to remove fear for myself a lot sooner, in all parts of building my career. And, fear is a big, scary word that maybe somebody might not associate with like, oh, you're a fearful person. Because I'm actually like pretty experimental and interested in trying new things. But I think like everybody has self-talk, whether they're aware of it or not. And I think that there were times that when I'm looking back on how I prioritized my time, my efforts, my opportunities, there were moments I did things for other people because I was worried about their state of mind, their point of view, where they were at, what they might do. And so I would prioritize that above what I had already said was important to me first, right? And so going into 24, we have some pretty bullish goals for Zoco. And coming out of a year, we largely serve tech companies. We work alongside of internal product teams for software companies in a large part. It hasn't been a kind season to those teams, right? So it's like kind of a hard season to say like, oh, this is going to be our year. But it's going to be our year, Andy. But in order for it to be our year, like I can't deprioritize the things that I know are important, that I know are essential to getting there, because I get a new worry about, oh gosh, we just had an amazing teammate leave and how will other people think or feel? I'm going to do my best to take care of everybody and to make sure that we manage this change effectively. And it can't detract from what is already the priority, right? And I would say early days, I didn't always have the confidence to do that. I would easily put to the back burner what I wanted to do, what I knew was important, what I wanted for myself in order to take care of other people. And it's not that that will change. It's not that that's not still important, that we're not an incredibly people-centric, people-first company, and that I'm not that way in my personal life too. But I have to be able to balance both things and not detract from one another. So we had talked about boundaries at the top of this conversation. And I think being able to create boundaries for yourself, and boundaries are things that you can control, not that you're trying to create for other people. But it's really important to have those and to be upholding them as consistently as possible with all people, relationships, experiences in your life. And I think if I could have taught myself that sooner, I just would have had less suffering, right? Just like in all parts of life. I don't just mean ZOCO. I just mean in everything, right? So if you can introspect, know what's important to you, and really uphold it, really prioritize it ruthlessly, and do that in whatever way that works best for you, whether you're keeping count, keeping score, like you said, or you have some other way that works for you. I think that's probably the most key thing that has shifted for me in the last decade in a really positive way, that if I could go back and do it sooner, might have been pretty helpful.
Love that. I think it's a great place to stop. So that really helped me a lot. And your time was like super valued today, like I said. And I seriously can't thank you enough for all the advice. And what I do with these episodes is I kind of treat it as a way to, and James Clear talks about, like, you don't truly know something until you can teach it. So my goal with these interviews is to really, I go back and listen to them at work and take notes and digest, and I write blog articles and stuff like that about you as a spotlight. So hopefully through the process of digesting and teaching, we can help other people kind of learn the lessons as well. So that's the goal.
That's awesome.
But so if people want to learn more about you or ZOCO, and obviously we'll have the link in the show notes to like your website where we can see the animate. You guys have an awesome website, by the way. I love it. And like, especially like the Meet the Team page where you turn into like a Super Mario Bro, I think is sweet. If people want to go and learn more about you or your career, ZOCO, where should they go?
All those places you mentioned, Andy. LinkedIn. I am pretty open and transparent about what I think and feel. So I publish, to your point, a lot of stuff. Our website. I mean, the core of who ZOCO is we're champions for human-centered tech, right? So if you think about how you connect people and product, how design can be bigger than visuals and can really impact people's lives in a meaningful way, like that is what we're about. So anything that resonates in that manner out in the world, on the internet, that's when to think of us and what we stand for.